Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. So today is Tuesday, June 16th that I am recording this video, and there was some pretty big news that broke last night where Texas Tech quarterback Brendan Sorsby officially declared for the NFL Supplemental Draft amid his legal battle with the NCAA. So there's a lot to be made on this, and I'm sure there's a lot of great information and videos on YouTube and across the internet on this situation. For this video, I'm not really going to be focusing on that so much because now that Sorsby's going to the supplemental draft, I kind of want to talk about where could he fit in the NFL, what are some of his best potential fits, and potentially what it may cost to ultimately get him. So, first things first, Brendan Sorsby. Why is this important? Because given the scandals that he has, would you think, well, maybe NFL teams will just stay away from him? However, as we know with the NFL, quarterbacks run the league in NFL. The quarterback's the most important position in the sport, and to be a good team now, you need an excellent quarterback. I mentioned in past videos that I'm a Patriots fan, saw what Tom Brady did for about 20 years in his career, best quarterback ever, and it's such an important position. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, their dynamic skill sets have taken over the league and become like this new era of quarterbacks. Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, right in that same group as well. So having a great quarterback is very important, which is why even with Brendan Sorsby's scandals, I would say, I still think a team will take a flyer on him in the supplemental draft, and I think a team may actually take a flyer on him pretty high. I know we're talking about, I would say some fans are kind of spread out. Will it be a later pick, like 4th round or later? Or could we even get a 2nd or 1st round pick for Sorsby? I'm more of the opinion. I think this is a guy that if this did not happen and it was going into the 2027 NFL draft, Brendan Sorsby may very well have been a 1st round pick at quarterback. Especially in a class that's very deep heading into the college football season. You have Arch Manning, you have Dante Moore, you have several other quarterbacks as well, like Drew, was it Mestmaker, I think it is. They're all going to be rising up and down the boards as the season goes on here. Brendan Sorsby is expected to be one of these names had he played out the season without this scandal breaking. So it's going to play a very important role. Now that he's in the supplemental draft, the way the supplemental draft works is once the player is drafted by the team, they start right away, or they can play right away in the NFL this year. They don't have to be redshirted a year. If the team wants to play them, they can play them. So, Sorsby, if you're going to a team this year, you may still want to draft a quarterback next year, but you can get a good look at Sorsby for 16 weeks if you start him from the beginning, or in 17 weeks, whatever it is now, and see, maybe not. Maybe he's good enough. Maybe we don't need a quarterback. So I think Sorsby's going to play a very important role. So without further ado, let's get to some of the teams. We're going to go by division here on ESPN.com here. Start with the AFC East. The Bills, obviously, I don't think have a need for him. Neither do the New England Patriots with Drake May. The Miami Dolphins and the New York Jets are two teams in the East that I would keep an eye on. The Dolphins, they spent a good amount of money this offseason in signing Malik Willis. He comes over from Green Bay with head coach Jeff Hafley. So they have their starter in place in Malik Willis. The way his contract is structured, it's a 3-year deal, I do believe it is. There's not a whole lot of guaranteed money. So if the Dolphins decided they want to bring in Sorsby as a developmental quarterback or even as good insurance in case Willis doesn't work out, they certainly could do that. They do have Quinn Ewers behind him. Cam Miller is the 3rd quarterback. Mark Gronkowski is the 4th. So no disrespect to Quinn Ewers, but it's not like the Dolphins are thriving with a ton of great quarterback depth. So if they wanted to take a flyer on Brendan Sorsby, the Dolphins, it would make a lot of sense. The only thing that's holding me back is Willis coming over from Green Bay with Jeff Hafley. He saw him all year. He knows what kind of quarterback he is, and they went out in free agency and invested in him. To me, I would say the Dolphins at least hold off on selecting a quarterback high for now. So even though the Dolphins could potentially pick Sorsby, obviously this could age terribly, and I could be wrong and they do take him, but I feel like it doesn't really make so much sense for the Dolphins to do it. They're clearly a rebuilding team. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the league in all likelihood, but they're trying to build up the culture, find out which players are good on the team, which players maybe aren't, and which players going into the next season in the free agency and draft they can build around. I still think Malik Willis has about this year and next year to prove himself as the quarterback of this team as the roster starts to improve and gets better. So I don't know if Sorsby's the likeliest fit for Miami, but I wouldn't rule it out. Now, the New York Jets, in my opinion, the Jets are one of my favorite fits for Brendan Sorsby, and here's why. The Jets are a team that has been the maligned laughingstock of the AFC East and honestly of the AFC for a very long time. And I don't need to tell this to Jets fans. Jets fans know this every single year. There's a little bit of optimism in the offseason. They come into the regular season, they get absolutely demolished, whether it's the Bills or the Patriots, even the Dolphins for Tua for a while. The Jets can never seem to get over that hump. Now, this year, they feel this is the best that they've been in a while. They've invested. They got Geno Smith in at quarterback coming back to the Jets. They went heavily in the draft, getting Omar Cooper Jr. and Kenyon Sadiq at receiver and tight end, already with Mason Taylor, so a lot of 12 personnel will be happening at tight end on the Jets. Garrett Wilson, the starting wide receiver, I would argue a very underrated wide receiver, and Adonai Mitchell. Now, their backup quarterbacks, they drafted Cade Klubnik in the 4th round, the quarterback out of Clemson. Their third strings are Brady Cook and Bailey Zappi. And again, I'm a Patriots fan, so I remember what Bailey Zappi looked like at quarterback. If Geno Smith goes down, I don't know if you want to see Brady Cook or Bailey Zappi coming in. And Cade Klubnik, he is a 4th-round rookie out of Clemson. He could be something. A 4th-round pick, clearly they value him enough to take him. But Brendan Sorsby, in my view, could have been a first-round talent. And if the Jets bottom out this year, whether they fire the head coach or not, Aaron Glenn, whether they fire him or not next year, they're likely going to be taking a quarterback in the 1st round. They have that extra 1st-round pick for a reason. They want to be able to move up and get a quarterback if they want to. But what if they get a jump start on that? Maybe they select Brendan Sorsby maybe with a 2nd-round pick instead of a 1st-rounder, because I believe the supplemental draft rule is you have to use your own 1st-round pick to give up in the supplemental draft. So if the Jets were to do that, they may be giving up the 1st or 2nd overall pick if they bottom out to go and get Sorsby. So I don't think they would do that, but they could give up their 2nd-round pick. Maybe no one else higher than them bids at 1st. And maybe they could have like sort of the pick of the crop, and they could get Brendan Sorsby, have him develop with Geno Smith and Cade Klubnik, probably cut Cook and Zappi. That would give you at very least an opportunity that if things bottom out, Geno Smith maybe doesn't return to form like he was in Seattle. Maybe he looks more like Raiders Geno Smith. Maybe Cade Klubnik just isn't as good in camp as Brendan Sorsby could be. It would give the Jets at very least a high upside developmental player to try out for this year. If he doesn't work out, well, you're probably picking 1st overall next year anyway, so it doesn't really matter. You could roll with Sorsby as a backup quarterback. You could try and trade him for like a 4th or a 5th a year later. You won't get the same return on investment, but taking a gamble at quarterback for the Jets, I would argue is certainly very worth it. Or definitely very worth it. We saw them take big risks before. Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson, developmental guys they picked high. Why not take a chance on Brendan Sorsby and see maybe if you can strike lightning in a bottle? And if it doesn't work, you'll have that extra 2nd or those 2 1st-round picks. You'll probably be picking high. You can get a franchise quarterback in Dante Moore or Arch Manning in the top 2. So the Jets are honestly probably my top 2. There's one other team which I'll get to in a moment, but the Jets, I would argue, is one of my favorite spots for Brendan Sorsby to possibly go. As for the AFC North, the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson, obviously he won't go there. Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow, I don't think he'd go there. The Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers have been talked about a little bit. Now, I've heard things saying from Todd Monken, the head coach of the Browns, that he doesn't envision them taking Brendan Sorsby. And it's a kind of a similar situation to the Jets, but they have Deshaun Watson, who at this point he'll play out the year. I'd be very surprised if Deshaun Watson returns to Houston Texans form and becomes like an all-star quarterback. Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel and Taylor Green round out the depth in the quarterback room. So the Browns, I definitely don't think have their franchise quarterback on the roster right now. Would they take a flyer on Brendan Sorsby? Well, despite them not, I believe, having the franchise quarterback, it's still a very, I would say, cramped quarterback room. The GM that drafted all of them in was it Andrew Berry? He drafted Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel, so he drafted both of them. Deshaun Watson's already there. You're not going to be able to cut him because of his money. So if you go out and get Brendan Sorsby, the only thing is you're going to be cutting one of Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders that you drafted last year with decently high picks. I mean, that could be no problem if you think Sorsby's worth it, but the head coach doesn't sound 100% sold on doing it. But I think Sorsby would actually be a good move for Cleveland. The only thing is, if Deshaun Watson ends up being good and surprises everybody, well, you're kind of just wasting a pretty valuable pick and getting Sorsby here. But if you really have questions on Watson, you don't believe Shedeur or Dylan Gabriel are it, why not take a flyer on Brendan Sorsby? So the Browns are someone I would keep an eye out for. I'm not totally sure that they would go for it with a 2nd-round pick, but I think they're a team at very least to consider taking a potential flyer on. Next, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I've seen this one be mentioned. The elephant in the room on this one is Aaron Rodgers has already come out and said this will be his last year in the NFL, so the developmental long-term backup and future franchise quarterback could be in play for the Steelers. The only problem is the Steelers already invested in that in this offseason, where they have Will Howard, who they drafted last year, who head coach Mike McCarthy reportedly likes a lot, and they drafted Drew Aller, the Penn State quarterback, in the third round in this year's NFL draft. In addition to Mason Rudolph as well, I would imagine he'll probably end up getting cut in training camp, but you have Rodgers, and you have two developmental quarterbacks in Howard and Aller before him. Are you going to go out and get Brendan Sorsby, where then you're probably cutting Mason Rudolph, and then since you just drafted Drew Aller, you're probably cutting Will Howard as well? Or you could do what the Patriots did, and I think it was 2000, where you carry 4 quarterbacks on the roster. You're probably cutting Mason Rudolph, but then you have Howard, Aller, and Sorsby essentially like developing together and hoping one of them for next year will end up being like a great player. The Steelers could do that. It would be a little bit surprising given they invested in Aller and Howard already on the roster, but they're not a team I would 100% rule out as a possibility. I don't think they're at the top of the list, but I think they're a potential sleeper for maybe a Brendan Sorsby spot. So those are the Steelers. For the AFC South, the Texans have CJ Stroud, and I think they really want a big year from him in year 3, but I don't think they're going to go for Sorsby. The Tennessee Titans just drafted Cam Ward last year, so I don't think they'll do that. The Jaguars have Trevor Lawrence, so unless they want a backup quarterback, they won't go for him. The Colts, I don't think they would either. It is kind of a sneakier spot. Daniel Jones, obviously, coming back to the team. He does have injury questions, though. Anthony Richardson's going to be gone, whether it's going to be a trade this year or free agency next year. He's not going to be on this team much longer. So the backup spot is potentially open. Now, they do like Riley Leonard as a backup quarterback. They have Easton Stick as the 4th. The Colts are not a team that's going to get a lot of attention for going after Brendan Sorsby, but if they have serious questions about Daniel Jones and maybe they do Riley Leonard as a good backup, I wouldn't hate the idea of bringing in Sorsby. Maybe you get lucky and get him for like a 3rd-round pick or a 4th-round pick in the supplemental draft. You have him slot in maybe as the 2nd or 3rd string quarterback as kind of like really good insurance in case Daniel Jones maybe gets hurt again or he doesn't play as well. You can move Anthony Richardson, have Leonard be the backup, have Sorsby develop. I don't know if the Colts would do this. I don't think they probably would with Chris Ballard being the GM, but it would be an intriguing spot that it would almost kind of like raise the eyebrows a little bit, be like, really, why did the Colts do that? Then when you start to look at it, it's like, well, it may not be the worst insurance idea in case Daniel Jones, maybe his injury's not going as well in the recovery. It maybe could be something to consider. I don't think so, but it could be something. And the rest of the South, I don't think really is going to do it. AFC West, the Denver Broncos have Bo Nix. I don't think they go for him. Kansas City Chiefs obviously has Patrick Mahomes, though we know Andy Reid just got Justin Fields, so he clearly values the backup quarterback position with Mahomes' injury, but again, I don't think they go for Sorsby. Las Vegas Raiders, they just drafted Fernando Mendoza 1st overall, so he's not going to go to the Raiders. Chargers of Justin Herbert, so I would imagine the AFC West essentially says, no, we're good. NFC East, Dallas Cowboys have Dak Prescott. It is in the same state as Texas Tech, but Dak Prescott, one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. Unless they want to go for a swing on like a backup, I don't really think that will work there. New York Giants just drafted Jackson Dart and is going into his 2nd year. I don't imagine the Giants will take a swing on Brendan Sorsby. Washington Commanders, similar, Jaden Daniels heading to year 3. Don't think they swing on him as well. The Eagles, however, intrigue me. Because Howie Roseman, as we know, he loves investing in backup quarterbacks. He does this almost every year. And like the 6th round or the 7th round, he'll take a flyer on a Tanner McKee or a Cole Payton, try and develop them, and then in a few years flip them for like a late pick and maybe even like an early, like day 3, maybe a late day 2 pick. He loves to do this. So Howie being a potential target on the Eagles for Brendan Sorsby makes a lot of sense. Now for this year, I know there's a lot of questions about Jalen Hurts in terms of, well, with this new offense with Mekhi Lemon and Devontae Smith running a lot of middle-of-the-field type of routes, can Jalen Hurts live up to that? Jalen Hurts, a lot of people forget this, was not a first-round quarterback. He was also drafted as a second-round developmental QB. If there's serious questions about whether Jalen Hurts can do that, well, Brendan Sorsby could be drafted probably with a second-round supplemental draft pick. Maybe Philadelphia would have to give up a first to get ahead of like the Jets or the Cardinals, who may have a second-rounder. So if they want to go for him, maybe they give up their first-rounder next year if they really believe in Brendan Sorsby. That would kind of admit that, okay, Jalen Hurts will probably be off this team in a year or two if they did make that move. But he's someone that could slot in. There's Andy Dalton, Tanner McKee, Cole Payton. I mean, one of these 3 you could probably take off the roster and then have Brendan Sorsby slot in. Maybe you trade away Tanner McKee to like an Arizona or something and get like a draft pick for him and have Brendan Sorsby slot in. It could be an intriguing situation. Again, I don't know if the Eagles will do it, but We know how he loves developing backup quarterbacks and maybe even starting quarterbacks. He did it with Jalen Hurts when Carson Wentz was still on the roster. So given the boldness that Howie Roseman ultimately does, every time you think he's going to zig, he zags. So I would not rule the Eagles out as a potential destination as well. NFC North, Chicago Bears just drafted Caleb Williams. I don't think that's going to happen. Detroit Lions, Jared Goff has done a very solid job since getting there, so I don't think they're a potential fit. Green Bay Packers, Jordan Love's the QB there. I don't think that's a fit either. Minnesota Vikings, I think Minnesota Vikings, there's a conversation to be had here. We talked a lot about the quarterback competition going underway this year. You have Kyler Murray, you have J.J. McCarthy, Carson Wentz, Max Brosmer. Wentz and Brosmer, I would imagine, are not really factoring into this conversation so much. The camp battles between J.J. McCarthy and Kyler Murray. Now, from what I've heard so far, again, they're giving them both 50-50 reps, but you bring in Kyler Murray for a reason. You're hoping he can essentially take the job without too much of a problem and become the Kyler Murray all-star quarterback like his first few years in Arizona. What if Kyler Murray, who's on, I believe, a one-year deal, what if he has a very good year and it's another Sam Darnold situation? He decides, you know what, I'd rather go to this location instead because they're offering me way more money. I'll be a franchise quarterback again. And maybe they you have Justin Jefferson, so they're probably not going to like the receivers better, but maybe Murray decides to cash in and leaves. Or at very least, there's a little bit in the back of the mind of, well, look, Kyler Murray will be our quarterback this year. Maybe we'll extend him, maybe we won't. J.J. McCarthy, we love what he, obviously a few years ago, we love the skills that he has that we wanted to develop, but it just has not worked out for him. Maybe Brendan Sorsby presents a potential off-ramp to having another young quarterback come in and develop behind Kyler Murray for a year, and then if Murray decides to leave, or if Sorsby really impresses in camp, maybe Sorsby can be the backup this year and the starter next year. Minnesota's a potential sleeper fit, kind of like the Colts as well. I don't know if they'll go for it, but could be something interesting to keep an eye out for. That's the NFC North. Now let's look at the NFC South. Atlanta Falcons, Carolina Panthers, New Orleans Saints, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't imagine the New Orleans Saints with Tyler Shuck will go for this, or the Carolina Panthers with Bryce Young will go for this. The Atlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, though, I think are also potential sleepers on this. I would not put them towards the top of the list, but I think they're sleepers. The Atlanta Falcons, they have Michael Penix, who they invested in very highly at the top of the draft and was a shock to everybody, really. And they have Tua Tagovailoa they brought in this year, fighting it out for the top spot. Behind them, they have Trevor Siemian and Jack Strand. No disrespect to Trevor Siemian or Jack Strand here, but if Penix and Tua aren't great, that's not very good quarterback depth. Now, they're hoping that Tua or Penix, either one of the lefty quarterbacks, will elevate themselves, become the starter, have a very good year, and I'm sure Atlanta would love to re-sign them and become the franchise quarterback. But it's kind of a similar situation in Minnesota with McCarthy and Kyler Murray. What if it doesn't work out where both Penix and Tua aren't that good? Or maybe one of them does do well, say Tua does well, and decides to cash in and go elsewhere and get a ton of money. That could be a potential situation as well. Kevin Stefanski last year when he was the head coach of the Browns, he was with Andrew Berry and drafting Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel. I'm sure right now, even if he doesn't end up drafting Brendan Sorsby, he's probably looking at the tape, looking at maybe if any of their scouts have on Brendan Sorsby the information they have. He may be thinking about this idea as, okay, they know Penix and Tua are on the roster. Maybe they decide to throw like a third-round pick or a fourth-round pick on the supplemental draft and see if they could get Brendan Sorsby to come in as the third quarterback, develop behind Tua and Penix for a little bit, and then if the unthinkable happens where Penix and Tua both do terribly this year, maybe the last 6 weeks of the season, they know they're not making the playoffs, though the NFC South is very competitive, so they always have a chance to. Maybe they say, let's give Sorsby a shot for the last few weeks, see what he can do. I don't know if Atlanta's going to go for it, but again, they're a team that I would not entirely rule out. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers is a really interesting one. Baker Mayfield's their starting quarterback, but this is his last year of his deal. He's been very vocal. He wants a new deal. He wants to re-sign in Tampa Bay, but this is going to be a big prover year. At the start of the season last year, Baker was playing like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. His stats were incredible. Him and Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Emeka Egbuka were firing on all cylinders. Baker looked incredible. Towards the end of the season, though, Baker was hurt. It didn't really look like it was going as well. A lot of the players in the Bucs started getting hurt. It didn't look like the Baker in the first half of the season. Which Baker we get in 2026 may be a very big indicator of this. Now, the Bucs, when you look at their depth, they have Jake Browning, they have Connor Bazelak, and Jalen Daniels. Jake Browning, I'll imagine, will be on the rosters, either quarterback 2 or quarterback 3 if they were to bring in Brendan Sorsby. These other two, I don't think you have any problem with cutting. But Baker's a lot of uncertainty right now. He's in the last year. We know Tampa Bay, despite Tom Brady coming there, obviously Tampa Bay has a very hardcore, dedicated local fan base, but it's not as big in terms of a national fan base as, say, some of the other teams like in New York or in Philadelphia or in Los Angeles. So attracting big-name players that come to Tampa Bay can sometimes be a struggle for the Buccaneers. So drafting someone like Brendan Sorsby in the supplemental draft could be an interesting way to bring in a high-upside developmental quarterback if they have questions about re-signing Baker Mayfield. Jason Light, in my opinion, is one of the smartest and best GMs in the NFL. He always seems to kill it in the draft every single year. So if he decides maybe Baker Mayfield will have him play out the year, will leave the door open to resigning a contract, but if they're not 100% sold on him, maybe they feel Brendan Sorsby will have a little bit of upside they could bring in here. I don't think it'd be impossible for the Buccaneers to take a flyer on Sorsby with a second-round pick in the supplemental draft. Maybe even, if they have to go above the Jets or the Cardinals, maybe even throw a first-round pick in there. If they're anticipating being a good team that can win the division, maybe pick in like 20 to 32 range. Why not? Why not take a chance on Brendan Sorsby if they really believe he can be the quarterback after Baker Mayfield at the end of the year? Again, I don't know if the Bucs will do it, but Jason Light, I would bet, given the type of GM he is, always forward-thinking, I would imagine he's probably having that conversation. So that's the NFC South. Now we come to the NFC West. And this last team that I have to go over, the Arizona Cardinals, is currently my top fit for Brendan Sorsby, and I'm going to explain why. Los Angeles Rams, we know they're not going to pick Sorsby. They just drafted they have Matthew Stafford. They just drafted Ty Simpson. He's not going to go there. The 49ers have Brock Purdy. Not going to go to the 49ers. The Seahawks have Sam Darnold, who just won them a Super Bowl. I don't think they need to take any swings on Brendan Sorsby. Now the Cardinals came into this video today for me as the team that I think is most likely right up there with the Jets to go after Sorsby. The Cardinals, like the Jets, are expected to not have a very strong season and will probably be picking somewhere in the top 5 picks of the NFL draft in 2027. Now their quarterback room is Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew, and third-round pick Carson Beck, and then also Keaton Slovis as well. The Cardinals are not expecting to have a great year. Gardner Minshew, we know what Gardner Minshew is at this point. He's not a franchise quarterback. He's sort of in between like a good backup and maybe like a French starter, but he's not someone that's going to give you a ton of upside. Jacoby Brissett, we've seen him. We've seen him in New England. We've seen him all around the league here. He's a very good bridge quarterback. He can keep a team afloat. He can win probably 8 to 9 games with a decent roster. Arizona really doesn't have that. They have Jeremiah Love. They have Marvin Harrison Jr. Those are good players with upside that can become, hopefully, potential superstars for them. Trey McBride, one of the best tight ends in the league. But is Jacoby Brissett really the type of quarterback you want leading this team? No, this is a bridge year. You're going to try and get a quarterback at the top of the draft next year. Why not get a jump head start on that by bringing in Brendan Sorsby? Because Brendan Sorsby, at very least, you maybe put a second-round pick in the supplemental draft. I do believe the Cardinals, given how they finished last year, they may have the top odds in the supplemental draft. So if they put their second in, if no other team puts in a first and they all do seconds, I think the Cardinals may have the tiebreak over them, so they would get Brendan Sorsby. Now, I don't know if the Cardinals will put a first-round pick in there because, again, their first-round pick could definitely be in the top 5 next year, so I don't know if they'd want to risk that happening. But if teams are too afraid to put first in and they only go seconds or lower, that gives the Cardinals a good chance of getting him. Jacoby Brissett also is holding out right now for a new contract. He wants to be paid better for the season. So there's a potential that if it comes to it, Brissett may ultimately just decide not to play and sit out this year. I don't know if it'll come to that, but it's a possibility. Gardner Minshew, Carson Beck, Brendan Sorsby, I'd argue, may be able to beat them both out of camp for the starting job if he were to come in here. Now again, I mentioned this with the Browns. The Cardinals are looking at drafting probably Dante Moore or Arch Manning in the top of the draft next year. But what if they give up a second-round pick, bring in Brendan Sorsby, let him play? If Jacoby Brissett's not going to play, let Brendan Sorsby play for most of the year, if not maybe even all the year. See what he can do. It's really no harm there. If he's good, great, roll with him next year. You don't have to worry about investing in the top quarterback at the top of the draft. If he's not good, well, you're going to have a really good pick anyway. Get a quarterback, get the one you want to build around, and then maybe flip Sorsby to another quarterback-needy team. Because every year, you always look at the roster and say, well, how is a team going to become a quarterback-needy team? Every year, there's always a handful of teams that needs quarterbacks. So I think it's worth the risk for the Cardinals to do. I know the offense in the room is going to be, what about Carson Beck? They just drafted him in the 3rd round. It's torn because when he was at Georgia, he looked like a decent quarterback. I think it was his junior year or sophomore year. That could be someone that could be like a first-round pick. Last year in Miami, the final year in Georgia, it didn't really look too great for Beck. Most analysts that I've seen online project back to be more like a decent or good backup quarterback, maybe even someone like, at the best, Jacoby Brissett. That doesn't scream franchise quarterback to me. So it's possible I would even bring in Brendan Sorsby and have Carson Beck as maybe as a long-term backup quarterback if he pans out. I don't think it's a bad idea for this year to have Jacoby Brissett on the roster, get that contract figured out, roll with Brendan Sorsby and Carson Beck, maybe cut Gardner Minshew, and then you could roll with a decent fringe or decent bridge quarterback in Brissett, 2 developmental guys in Carson Beck and Brendan Sorsby. Let them develop, let them play, see what they can do, and then if it doesn't work out, just go draft a quarterback next year. So the Cardinals and the Jets, I think, are definitely 2 teams that are at the top of my list because there's really no harm in doing it. You give up a second or a third round pick, get Brendan Sorsby in here, see what he can do, and if it doesn't work out, you're picking high next year anyway. It's really, I see no risk in doing it. So those are some of my favorite fits across the NFL for where I think Brendan Sorsby to go. I'm interested to hear what you think, though. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. What team do you think Brendan Sorsby will go to in the NFL Supplemental Draft? What round also do you think he'll go to? I hope you enjoyed this video. Please, I'd really appreciate it as I'm getting this channel off the ground if you could hit like and hit subscribe as well. That would really do me and my channel a whole lot of favors, so I'd really appreciate if you could do that. For now, that is it. Thank you so much for watching and hope to see you in a future video.